tonight we're heading somewhere warm, somewhere incense drifts on the breeze. The smell of grilled satay lingers in the air, and roosters have absolutely no respect for your circadian rhythm. Welcome to Bali, where the gods get their own snacks and temples come with nap pavilions. You've just stepped off the imaginary plane. Your feet are a little swollen, your brain's a little fried, and everything is loud in the way only a tropical place can be. Motorbikes buzz like oversized mosquitoes. Children laugh with full volume, and a gamelan orchestra tinkles through the trees like someone gave a xylophone to a waterfall. You pass under a red brick gate carved with curling dragon shapes. There's no roof, it's a split gate called a candy benta, the kind that seems to slice the sky in two. And you, jet-lagged and slightly dazed, walk through it like it's a dream you're already inside. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far we travel together. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The temple grounds stretch out before you. Low walls, mossy and ancient. Little shrines everywhere, some no taller than a shoebox, some towering like stairways to the sky. Chickens peck lazily in the dirt. A dog snoozes in the sun, like it owns the place. Which, spiritually speaking, maybe it does. You step into your first courtyard, and the air changes. It's cooler here somehow. Still. Your breath slows down without asking permission. A woman in a lace kebaya walks past, balancing a basket of marigold offerings on her head. She smiles at you, and you realize your sandals are squeaking like a comic sidekick. You pass a pavilion open on all sides, its raised floor made of smooth, cool wood. There's no furniture, just a platform and a roof. It's beautifully carved, peaceful. A little too peaceful. You blink, you yawn. You start to wonder if you're allowed to lie down. This, your guide whispers, is a bale loji, sometimes called a nap pavilion. And no, it's not for tourists who ate too much satay. Not exactly. You try to play it cool, but your brain is already conjuring images of monks in robes, snoozing under temple eaves. Is that really what this is? A holy napping platform? Why does a sacred site come with designated chill zones? As you explore further, more of these little raised wooden platforms appear, each nestled beside shrines or behind elaborate gates. They vary in size. Some could hold a family picnic, others barely fit 2 people lying down. None have mattresses, but the wood is worn smooth by centuries of, well, you're still figuring that part out. The sun climbs higher. You start sweating in new and interesting places. You realize that in this climate, any place offering shade and silence is a kind of sacred space. But it goes deeper than that. Because Bali isn't just about climate, it's about cosmic alignment. Everything here, from the shape of the temple complex to the direction a statue faces, is based on balance. Not efficiency, not aesthetics. Balance between mountain and sea, between human and spirit, between the seen and unseen. The Balinese concept of Trihita Karana literally means 3 courses of well-being. It's the idea that harmony comes from balancing your relationship with the gods, with other people, and with nature. Temples aren't just for prayer, they're alignment machines. And sometimes, to align, you lie down. Historians still argue whether these pavilions were designed for ritual rest or simply served a practical function. Maybe both. You suspect the truth, like a nap, is somewhere in between. As you sit cross-legged on the smooth wooden platform, eyes half-lidded, you notice the details. The curls in the ceiling beams, shaped like clouds or waves. The faint smell of old incense soaked into the floorboards. The way sound seems to hush itself as it crosses the threshold. A child runs past, barefoot and giggling. An elder follows, not in pursuit, but in patience. A rooster crows again, as if it's auditioning for a bigger role. You start to suspect that even chaos here is choreographed, that maybe naps aren't lazy, but strategic. A reset button for the soul. And while you won't find nap listed on any formal religious calendar, there's something undeniably sacred about rest when it's offered without guilt. Not as recovery, not as reward, just as part of the rhythm. Maybe that's the point of these pavilions. They don't demand silence or even stillness, but they offer it anyway. A gesture, a possibility, a square of shade that says, you could, just lie down. And for a moment, just one soft, sweaty, sandal-squeaky moment, you believe it. You shift your weight on the platform, adjusting to the feel of ancient timber beneath you. It's not soft, but somehow it's gentle. The kind of surface that asks nothing from you, doesn't judge your posture, doesn't demand attention. It just holds you, like the island itself. The guide squats beside you with the quiet grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times. She doesn't speak immediately. In Bali, silence often means more than words. When she does talk, her voice is low, nearly whispering, almost as if she's letting the temple decide what can be shared. These were places for priests, she says, and for ancestors, and sometimes for no one at all. You blink. That last bit feels like a puzzle wrapped in a proverb. A nap spot for no one? She continues. Some say these bale are spaces where spirits rest, between rituals. Others say they're for visiting family during temple festivals, for chatting, or waiting, or just being. You look around. No signs, no instructions, no "do not lie down" placards in 5 languages. That, in itself, feels revolutionary. The structure is elegantly simple. 4 pillars, a roof that flares at the ends like the wings of a bird in mid-hover. No walls, no barriers. It's what architects would call open plan, and what your jet-lagged body would call extremely tempting. In traditional Balinese temples, different courtyards represent different layers of spiritual proximity. The outermost space, Jabba Pisan, is open to everyone. It's where ceremonies begin, where social life overlaps with the sacred. The further in you go, the more restricted the space becomes, until you reach the Shero, the innermost sanctum, where only priests and spirits dwell. But here's the thing. These nap pavilions exist in every layer. Sometimes they sit in the open, sometimes tucked deep inside. That alone tells you something. Rest isn't just preparation for the sacred, it is the sacred. Now, pause for a moment and take in the atmosphere. Overhead, the sound of a palm frond brushing tile, a chicken clucking with mild disapproval. Somewhere in the distance, someone started frying something that smells like heaven dipped in peanut sauce. You feel your shoulders drop, your breath evens out. A breeze lifts a strand of hair from your neck. Suddenly, you get it. You really get it. The concept of doing nothing isn't laziness here. It's cultural architecture. It's considered part of the rhythm of devotion. In fact, the Balinese word ngaya describes the act of selfless offering, not just in the sense of bringing fruit to a shrine, but offering your time, your presence, even your pause. Historians still argue whether the use of these pavilions dates back to the island's earliest Hindu-Javanese influences or developed later under Balinese kingship. Some even suggest they were borrowed from pre-Hindu Austronesian customs, when village structures often doubled as communal rest platforms. What's clear is they've endured quietly for centuries. And unlike the towering shrines or elaborately tiered meru, nap pavilions aren't built to impress. They're built to invite, to welcome tired bodies and wandering thoughts, to say, stay as long as you need. The gods aren't going anywhere. Imagine a world where every spiritual structure came with a designated space to decompress. A chill zone between the chanting and the offerings. A moment where doing nothing was the most appropriate thing you could do. It's not just temples either. These pavilions or similar ones appear in royal compounds, village squares, even family courtyards. They go by different names: bale dangjin, bale duang, bale gede. Some are meant for weddings, others for mourning, some for preparing ritual items, and yes, some explicitly for naps. In a way, they're like open-air time machines. You sit down on one and time stops. Not in a magical sense, more like in the way your grandma's front porch feels timeless. Like if you waited long enough, every answer would eventually wander past. The guide taps the floor. "This wood," she says, "it's jackfruit. In the old days, only priests were allowed to nap here. But now, anyone respectful may rest. You're not quite sure what counts as respectful. You hope your sunscreened shoulders and sincerely confused expression qualify. So you nod, gratefully, sleepily. Beside the pavilion, a small stone guardian squats, mouth open in a permanent snarl. Not scary, exactly. More like someone caught mid-rant about misbehaving grandchildren. Offerings have been tucked into the crook of its elbow. Petals, rice, maybe a single biscuit. It makes you wonder, do the spirits nap too? If they can accept snacks, why not siestas? You picture a temple full of ancestors, all snoozing politely between rituals. One ghost softly snoring in the corner, while another fans herself with a banana leaf. A whole community, past and present, connected by the shared rhythm of pause. Of course, modern Bali is a different tempo. Scooters weave through traffic like caffeinated eels. Tour groups crowd temple gates, selfie sticks in hand. But still, these pavilions remain, unfenced, undisturbed, unrushed. And you, sitting cross-legged, finally feel the full weight of that. Not heaviness, but the weight of a culture that honors stillness, that builds it into the very framework of sacred architecture. The sun shifts. A bell rings in the distance. The breeze picks up again, lifting the fringe of your shirt like it's checking in. You lean back on your palms. Exhale. Maybe this isn't just a story about naps. Maybe it's about creating the space to nap. About choosing to rest, not because you're tired, but because you're human. You're still in the pavilion, and somehow you haven't fallen asleep yet. Though that's more a testament to your curiosity than your willpower. Around you, the temple hums with quiet life. A whisper of incense drifting sideways. The soft padding of barefoot footsteps. The occasional clack of bamboo against stone. This place doesn't feel frozen in time. It feels like it chose a slower tempo and stuck with it. Let's zoom out for a moment. Across Bali, these pavilions, called bale, are essential building blocks of architecture. Not extras, not afterthoughts, essentials. In traditional Balinese compounds, every family home includes a layout that echoes the cosmic order. One building for sleeping, one for cooking, one for ceremonies. And yes, one for simply hanging out, the bale. But in temples, the bale takes on an elevated role. It becomes part of spiritual choreography, a stage not just for ritual, but for repose. You inch toward the edge of the pavilion and glance down at the carved step, smooth from centuries of footsteps. There's a quiet pride in that kind of wear, not from neglect, but from reverence, from thousands of feet climbing up to lie down. You might be wondering, why are these rest spaces in sacred sites at all? Isn't worship supposed to be, well, active? Here's the twist. Balinese spirituality isn't just about action, it's about balance, harmony. And that harmony shows up in 1,000 subtle ways. In temple layout, for instance, there's always a directional awareness. North and east are associated with purity. South and west lean toward the mundane, the ancestral. The central axis often becomes a bridge between human activity and the divine. And along that axis, you guessed it, a bale. It's not coincidence, it's cosmology. To the Balinese, the world isn't divided into sacred and secular. It's layered like rice terraces, each with its own function, all nourishing each other. The Nap Pavilion, then, becomes a kind of threshold, a buffer between divine interaction and human digestion, both literal and spiritual. You sit there a little straighter now, realizing the floor you're lounging on may once have supported dancers resting after a barong performance, or musicians waiting their turn in a temple ceremony, or villagers sheltering from the rain while discussing the best place to grow shallots this season. Historians agree that many bale, especially those near temple courtyards, were multifunctional. They weren't built solely for naps. They hosted offerings, chants, funerary preparations, puppet shows. But one use always surfaces again and again in oral history: resting. Here's where it gets a little more esoteric. Some elders believe that during temple festivals, when the veil between worlds grows thinner, the gods themselves descend to rest in these pavilions. Not to be worshipped, not to give orders, just to hang out. You picture a divine figure reclining sideways, elbow propped, sipping coconut water with mild amusement as chickens dart across the courtyard. It's not hard to imagine, especially when you're told that certain nap pavilions are considered so charged with presence, locals avoid sleeping in them unless it's a ritual necessity. One temple in Gianya is said to have a bale where people receive visions in dreams. Not dramatic ones, no flames or booming voices, just gentle nudges. A quiet ancestor pointing at an old well, a goddess reminding someone to fix their roof before the monsoon. Useful advice from the beyond. Now, historians still argue whether such beliefs stem from indigenous animist traditions or developed during Bali's integration into the broader Hindu-Buddhist cosmology of the Majapahit era. What's fascinating is how these layers overlap, not cancel out. Modern Balinese practice often weaves ancient animism, classical Hinduism, and local custom into one continuous fabric, like sleeping under a quilt made of several cultures. So when you lie down here, even for a moment, you are participating in that fabric. Your presence, your stillness, becomes part of the ritual flow. Not a disruption, but a rhythm. A boy runs past you, chasing a plastic bottle-turned makeshift ball. He pauses just long enough to flash you a grin. Then he's off again, sandals slapping stone. Behind him, a woman lays down a small square of palm leaf, filled with marigolds and a tiny dab of rice. She doesn't notice you. Or maybe she does. And it doesn't matter. You're another thread in the weave now. Let's pause for one of those charming oddities. There's a bale in northern Bali, known among locals not for its spiritual significance, but for how incredibly good the naps are. We're talking, I slept through a thunderstorm and a gamelan rehearsal, level naps. No one knows why. Some say it's the altitude. Others say it's the specific wood used in its beams. One elderly caretaker insists it's because the pavilion was built during a particularly lucky nap phase in the lunar calendar. He's joking. Maybe. But you think back to all the places you've seen designated for stillness. Hotel spas, yoga lounges, shaded benches in parks. None of them quite hit this note. This effortless mix of reverence and repose, of spiritual neutrality and quiet invitation. You're not required to pray here, or perform, or even meditate. You're just asked to be, preferably horizontally if you'd like. And somehow that's more radical than any incense-wrapped ceremony. Your guide returns, holding 2 cups of something warm and fragrant. She doesn't say what it is, but you detect ginger and something sweet beneath it. She settles onto the pavilion beside you, careful not to disturb the small offering someone placed at the corner. A few wilted petals, a broken biscuit, a folded prayer, maybe. You sip, and the warmth spreads. The moment opens like a flower, and you find yourself thinking, what if every busy place came with a pavilion like this? A pause tucked between subway stations, a nap zone in every school, a resting bale halfway through your daily to-do list. Maybe the gods of Bali were onto something. A breeze stirs the woven palm roof of the pavilion above you. It flutters just enough to make the carved edges dance with shadow. Somewhere beyond the temple gates, a rooster lets out a half-hearted crow, as if unsure what time it is. You're not sure either. The day here doesn't seem to track with regular hours. It moves more like the tide, slow, cyclical, indifferent to alarm clocks. Your guide gestures lazily toward the inner courtyard. You ready? She asks. Not for anything dramatic, just a walk, a meander really. So you stand, shake the sleep from your limbs and follow. Outside the bale, the temple spreads like a living organism, growing in directions that seem both intentional and improvisational. There are shrines tucked into corners, statues smothered in moss, and carved dragons slithering along staircases like they've been napping for centuries. It's not grand in the way of European cathedrals or Egyptian pyramids. It's intimate. 1,000 small details built for people who will actually use them. You pause beside a set of pavilions that look oddly familiar. Not in a dreamlike déjà vu way, more like you've seen them in a travel book, or the kind of Instagram account that makes you contemplate quitting your job and moving somewhere humid. These, you learn, are the sleeping pavilions of the gods. And no, not metaphorically. These structures, called bale perantenang or bale pemanku, depending on function, are literal resting spaces designated for the divine during festivals. During major temple ceremonies, sacred objects representing gods are paraded from their shrines and brought here to rest for hours or even days. Elaborate rituals accompany this process, of course, but the resting part? That's non-negotiable. It's a charming inversion. Instead of humans serving the gods tirelessly, the gods get nap breaks too. And not quick catnaps either. Proper, respectful, let's lay them down and play some soothing, gamelan music kind of naps. You almost want to ask, who fluffs their pillows? Now, historians have long debated the origins of this tradition. Some trace it to ancient animist practices, where spirits of nature were believed to enter household objects and rest during ritual. Others argue it emerged later, adapted from Javanese court traditions during the Majapahit influence on Bali in the 14th century. Still others point to possible links with Indian temple customs where deities are awoken and put to bed as part of daily puja. But no matter its origin, the result is deeply Balinese. That blend of reverence and relaxation. You find yourself wondering, what other culture gives its gods a hammock break? The answer, by the way, is not many. Certainly not with such formal infrastructure. As you tiptoe, yes, actually tiptoe, past one of the pavilions still dressed in colourful ceremonial cloth, your guide leans in. Even if the object's just symbolic, we treat it like it breathes, she whispers. And suddenly, that moss-covered statue doesn't look quite so still. Not menacing, just very, very old, and maybe a bit amused by your clumsy reverence. You settle beside a low wall near the edge of the courtyard and watch as a few older women slowly sweep flower petals into tidy piles. They're not in a rush. There's no rush to be in. These are the slow hours after a big ritual. Time contracts here. You're used to temples that inspire awe. This one inspires rest. And yet, rest here is never just about sleep. It's a kind of spiritual punctuation mark. A pause between rituals that allows people and gods alike to breathe. You start to notice the rhythm. Prepare, offer, rest, celebrate, rest again, clean up, rest some more. No part of the cycle is skipped, especially not the naps. Here's a fun little twist. Many Balinese believe that the divine world mirrors the human one in structure. So when a god visits a temple during a festival, they need all the same comforts a human guest might. Food, music, company, and yes, a comfy spot to lie down. The logic isn't irreverent, it's intimate, respectful. Like making sure your grandmother has a soft chair at the party. That's why, in many village temples, the pavilion reserved for the divine rest is often the nicest one. It's elevated, perfectly aligned with sacred directions, and adorned with the most delicate offerings. Some even have bolsters or cushions laid out, though no one would dream of sitting on them. You glance up again at the roof, now realizing how carefully it's aligned to channel air, light, and even sound. These aren't random thatched huts. They're architectural lullabies, designed not just for function, but for harmony with the elements. The wood breathes, the woven bamboo sighs. The floor holds warmth like a memory. Of course, you're not alone in being charmed by this. Architects from all over the world have studied Balinese bale for their genius balance of simplicity and performance. Their ability to stay cool in heat, dry in storms, and open to spirit without being overly fragile. In fact, some scholars argue that Nat pavilions are an unintentional masterclass in sustainable design. And it makes sense. What better way to build a temple than by ensuring both your gods and your grannies can take a solid nap in it? You wander over to a side pavilion where a lone priest is tucking away ceremonial items, carefully folding cloth, rearranging trays of spent incense. He hums to himself. The melody is repetitive, meditative. Another kind of lullaby. You sit cross-legged nearby and try to hum along. You fail spectacularly, but it doesn't matter. He chuckles, then gestures toward the bale you just passed. "That one's for the rice goddess," he says. But she's not picky. Any place with shade and good company will do. Shade and good company. You file that away as a working definition of paradise. There's something rebellious about this quiet, you realize. In a world that demands productivity, temples like these insist on pauses, on naps, on lounging without guilt. And somehow, they manage to spiritualize it. You think back to those sacred objects placed gently on cushions, to the belief that rest isn't just permitted in holy spaces, it's required, that the gods like you need a break from time to time. And as another gust of warm wind curls under the pavilion eaves, you start to feel very, very close to divine. You find yourself padding softly across the temple courtyard again, your steps cushioned by scattered petals and fallen frangipani blooms. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, roasted peanuts, and something floral you can't quite name. Maybe jasmine, maybe something older. There's a lazy cricket chorus starting up in the underbrush, and it's still not entirely clear what time of day it is. But again, it doesn't really matter. You pass a trio of teenagers sitting on the edge of a stone platform, weaving little offering baskets. Kanang sari, with fingers far more nimble than yours. They look up, grin, then return to their folding and pinching. Each palm-sized tray will hold a bit of rice, a flower, maybe a drop of perfume or coffee. Not grand sacrifices, just polite tokens of daily gratitude. These offerings are set out everywhere. On shrines, motorbikes, doorsteps, even ATM machines. And they all stem from the same core idea: balance. You give a little something to the seen world, and a little something to the unseen. The act of giving, no matter how small, maintains harmony. Even a sleepy kind of harmony. You drift back toward the cluster of bale, open-sided pavilions with cool floors and carved beams. The afternoon light slants through the gaps in the roof thatching, casting sleepy zigzags on the stone. It hits you then just how central the concept of balance is in Balinese architecture. Everything, literally everything, is designed to harmonize opposing forces. Take the layout of the temple itself. There's an inner sanctum for high ritual, a middle space for community activity, and an outer courtyard for preparation and transition. Each level corresponds to spiritual zones: high, middle, low, sacred, human, mundane. And nestled within those layers are the nap pavilions, half holy, half humane, the place where boundaries blur. You ease down onto one such platform. A small dog, possibly sacred, possibly just nosy, wanders over and flops beside you. It exhales with a dramatic little puff, like it's had a long day of spiritual supervision. You scratch its ear and glance around again, seeing the place with fresh eyes. This isn't just a temple, it's a choreography of rest. A system built not around frantic worship or stern discipline, but around slowing down, resetting, and showing up again with a fresh heart. And here's the wild part. This isn't an accident. Balinese cosmology is grounded in the idea of Trihita Karana, the three causes of well-being: harmony with the divine, with other people, and with nature. And rest? Rest touches all three. You nap to realign your body, clear your thoughts, and quiet your ego. And in doing so, you actually honor the gods, respect your community, and recharge your place in the natural cycle. Even gamelan music, those shimmering, hypnotic rhythms, follows this principle. There's no conductor, no dominant soloist. Just interlocking parts, each dependent on the other, playing in cycles designed to entrance and relax. Like a lullaby woven into the air. Now, some anthropologists argue that the communal rest spaces in temples also serve very practical social functions. Weddings, funerals, harvest festivals, all required people to spend hours or even days inside the temple complex. You can't expect everyone to stay standing, chanting or praying the whole time. The nap pavilions offered a socially acceptable place to collapse in between obligations. And yes, Scholars still debate whether these structures were originally sacred or domestic, or something in between. But you're less concerned about the origin story and more concerned with the breeze that's curling around your ankles. It's warm and smells like banana leaf and incense. You shift onto your side and rest your head on your arm, tempted by the cool stone under your cheek. And then a small child streaks by, barefoot, giggling, wearing what looks like a ceremonial sarong tied in 3 different wrong ways. An older woman follows, muttering but smiling. Neither pays any mind to your horizontal sprawl. You're part of the scenery now, a sleepy foreigner absorbed by the temple's gravity. You start to realize this is not a place where you ever fully arrive. You simply drift through, pausing, absorbing, exhaling, like incense, or clouds, or thoughts during meditation. Nearby, a man is slowly laying out cloth over another pavilion floor, smoothing the folds with the kind of care usually reserved for babies and ancient scrolls. He hums as he works. You don't recognize the tune, but you hum along anyway. Badly. Again. But there's no judgment here. Only rhythm. Only rest. This, you think, is what modern life forgets. That rest isn't the absence of doing. It's a kind of doing, a sacred act in itself. Even the chickens seem to get it. One wanders across the path, pauses beside you, and settles into a perfect squat, eyes half-lidded. For a moment, you wonder if it's meditating, or maybe it's just hot. You're about to close your eyes again when your guide returns with 2 tiny cups of hot ginger tea. She hands you one, then sits cross-legged without a word. You sip. It's spicy, earthy, and makes your toes tingle. You glance at her, then the temple, then the dog, then the drowsy chicken, and think, there's nowhere else you're supposed to be. No alerts, no meetings, no expectations. Just tea, shade, and the soft sounds of a world that knows how to rest. The ginger tea settles warm in your belly, and now the hush of the temple has a rhythm. Gentle, almost imperceptible, but insistent. It's in the distant ring of a gamelan bell, the swish of fabric as someone crosses a pavilion behind you, the creak of a bamboo offering pole swaying in the breeze. You're not sure how long you've been here, only that your heartbeat has slowed to match the tempo of the place. You lean back again, gaze wandering to the beams above. Intricate wood carvings snake across the rafters. Dragons, floral spirals, and mythical beasts locked in joyful acrobatics. This is no slapdash decoration. Each carving is placed with meaning, aligned with directions, seasons, and spiritual correspondences. Even the roof thatch is a kind of code, layered from sacred black grass that's been dried, blessed, and bound into careful bundles. This whole pavilion is more than just a knapsack. It's a woven message to the gods. We respect the pause. We honor the quiet. We make space for breath. And yet, you learn not all naps are created equal. In Bali, there are layers to resting, just like there are layers to offerings. There's the quick daytime dose, often in public, often without shame. Then there's the ceremonial rest, like during temple festivals when devotees stay overnight, catching short stretches of sleep in between dances or chants. And then there's trance rest. Yes, trance. The kind that blurs the line between nap and vision, between brainwave and prayer. Balinese ritual often incorporates trance states, especially during major festivals. A dancer might whirl themselves into a state of hyper-conscious stillness, appearing asleep but receiving spiritual insight. Or at least, that's one interpretation. Historians still argue whether trance in Balinese ceremonies is a performative act, a genuine spiritual possession, or a culturally guided altered state of awareness? Honestly, it might be all three, and then some. The fascinating part? These trance states often begin in the bale, the nap pavilions. The performer lies down, slows their breath, quiets their thoughts, and slips sideways into something else. It's a liminal space, both physically and metaphysically. You're here and not here, asleep but not gone, like a dream that knows it's dreaming. You shift slightly on your stone bench and consider this. How many other places on Earth have built-in architecture to support not just sleep, but spiritual drift? Most modern societies treat rest as a retreat, a break, a guilty pleasure even. You nap because you're weak, lazy, or overworked. But here, you nap because the divine needs you to reset, because the cosmos moves in cycles, and you're part of that rhythm, whether you like it or not. A rooster crows nearby, late to the party. Another one answers, equally off schedule. Time doesn't mean what it used to. You're suspended in something ancient, and oddly, that something includes a nap schedule. You remember your guide mentioning the concept of Nyepi, the Balinese Day of Silence. Once a year, the entire island shuts down, literally. No flights, no cars, no lights, no speaking, no cooking, no scrolling. Even tourists are expected to stay indoors, quiet and reflective. It's not just a cultural quirk, it's a ritual cleansing, a cosmic reboot. And you think, maybe these nap pavilions are like miniature Nyepi, micro resets, daily moments to turn inward, to hush the outside, to let your system realign without fanfare. Overhead, a monkey bounds across the roof beams. Just one, a scout. He pauses, peers down at you, then scampers off again. Unimpressed by your horizontal enlightenment, you grin. Fair enough. Enlightenment isn't exactly the goal here. But still, you wonder. What if the rest of the world adopted the nap pavilion model? Imagine a corporate office with a wing of open-air platforms, soft pillows and wind chimes. Or a school with designated contemplation nooks where students are encouraged to drift and daydream, not for productivity, not to refresh and optimize, just because you're human, and humans need rest. Back in the temple, a low chant begins. It's hard to locate the source. It feels like it's coming from the walls, or maybe the earth. A steady hum, deep and soft, like the temple itself is exhaling. You let it wash over you, your breath unconsciously sinking to its pace. The chant, your heartbeat, the breeze, they begin to layer together. You're not asleep, not exactly, but you're definitely not all the way awake. Your fingers trace the edge of the teacup, now empty and warm. A stray ant clambers up one side, pauses at the rim, then retreats with impressive speed. Even the ants here respect boundaries. You stretch, not to move, but just to feel your body take up space. There's no rush, no agenda, just the slow unraveling of a world that knows the sacred doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with naps. And just when you think you might actually doze off completely, a soft voice calls your name. Your guide again. She gestures toward the central courtyard, where a small ceremony is beginning. A priestess in white preparing to light incense, her hands moving like silk in water. You rise reluctantly, feet tingling from disuse. The dog from earlier trots alongside you, a silent chaperone. The monkey is long gone, but the chant continues, wrapping around your ribs like a shawl. As you follow the path toward the heart of the temple, you glance back at the pavilion. Still, still, still. Like it's waiting for you to return. And you know you will. Eventually. You pad softly toward the ceremony, each footfall cushioned by the cool stone path. A sweet smokiness begins to tinge the air. Frangipani and sandalwood braided into tendrils of incense that waft lazily upward like spirit fingers beckoning the divine. The courtyard hums with quiet purpose. No one hurries. No one commands attention. It's like everyone already knows their role in a story that's been told 1,000 times and will be told 1,000 more. You find yourself standing just beyond a low wall, carved with chiseled lotus blossoms. The priestess in white is folding her hands, lifting a small clay dish over her head. A curl of smoke trails from its center, spinning upward like a lazy tornado. The crowd, if you can even call it that, remains serene. A few older women in batik sarongs sit cross-legged under the eaves. A toddler tugs playfully at a string of marigolds. Even the chickens loitering in the shadows seem respectfully subdued. It's not showy, this ritual. No dramatic wailing, no thunderous drums, just a kind of quiet choreography. Scent, sound, stillness. And then it hits you. This is the context for the Nap Pavilions. They don't exist in isolation. They're not spa-like amenities or sleepy side rooms. They're embedded in a culture that orients everything around cycles. Of energy, of offering, of the day. The bale where you just rested isn't a break from the sacred. It's part of it. In Balinese cosmology, rest isn't separate from action. It's part of the rhythm that keeps the world from tipping off balance. People don't just rest after they work. They rest before. They rest during. They even rest for others. Ancestors, spirits, deities who require human stillness to enter the world. You glance around again, and suddenly the architecture feels alive. Thatched roofs aren't just functional, they're symbolic, designed to breathe with the sky. Pillars aren't just structural, they represent balance between upper, middle, and lower worlds. Every pavilion, from the sleeping ones to the cooking ones, is aligned to cardinal directions and spiritual principles. You notice how the Nap Pavilion you visited earlier faced the rising sun. Coincidence? Hardly. Historians still argue whether pavilion orientation in Balinese temples reflects specific cosmological calendars or local landscape features. But most agree it's never random. That pavilion faces east because east is sacred. It's associated with Brahma, the creator, and with renewal, with beginnings, which makes sense. If you're going to nap, why not do it in a space aligned with rebirth? You start to appreciate how deeply encoded everything is here. Even napping, especially napping. There's a concept in Balinese philosophy, RWR Bineda. It means dualism, but not in the good versus evil sense. It's more about complementary opposites. Light and dark, work and rest, speaking and silence. Everything has its partner, and together they create harmony. It's why people here offer both sweet and spicy food to spirits. Why ceremonies might begin with music and end in stillness. Why napping next to an altar is not only allowed, it's encouraged. And yes, it's why temples have dedicated spaces for dozing. The world needs sleepers as much as it needs priests. You glance toward the outer edge of the temple, where another bale stands. This one's less decorated, simpler in design. But you notice the worn indentations on its bamboo slats, the frayed edges of cushions faded by sun and time. This is clearly the community pavilion, the everyone pavilion. A place where farmers might lie down after morning offerings, or children curl up during midday heat. Sacred doesn't mean exclusive. The priestess finishes her slow, swirling movements and dips her fingers into a silver bowl. She flicks droplets of holy water across the space, and one lands squarely on your forehead. Cool, unexpected, but not unwelcome. You smile without meaning to, and one of the older women catches your eye. She nods, just once, a kind of acknowledgement, not of you exactly, but of your presence, your participation. Even in stillness, you've become part of the rhythm. Behind you, the dog lies down with a huff and proceeds to fall asleep like it's his job, which honestly, in this culture, it might be. And now you start to think back, way back, about how different cultures have always used architecture to guide human rhythms. Roman villas had open courtyards for afternoon lounging. Persian homes were built around central pools to cool the air and lull the senses. Japanese Ngawa verandas served as thresholds between doing and being. But Balinese nap pavilions, they might be the purest expression of this principle. A built-in pause button in the temple complex. A structure that says, you are allowed to stop. A gentle rain begins to whisper across the tiled roof, soft as breath. No one flinches. Rain here isn't a disruption, it's a blessing, a cleansing. And the pavilion, of course, is open-sided, so you can smell the wet air and hear the drops ticking off the leaves. It's like the world is making a lullaby just for you. You find a dry corner under the eaves and sit again, letting the sensory texture of the place seep into your bones. Everything here feels soft-edged. Even the stone carvings wear a kind of smile. Even the gods seem drowsy. And maybe that's the point. Not that the divine demands endless attention, but that the divine can be found in ease, in quiet, in a well-timed nap under an open sky. So you close your eyes again, just for a second, just long enough to feel your breath, slow, to become once again part of the pattern. You open your eyes slowly, not quite sure how long they were closed. The rain has stopped, but the air is thick with the delicious after scent of wet earth and mossy stone. A rooster crows somewhere in the distance, like a sound effect, cued perfectly for the transition. You stretch, and it feels completely normal, even expected, to do so in the middle of a sacred temple courtyard. Someone passes by, carrying a tray of small rice cakes and a thermos of ginger tea. They smile at you, as though you've always been here, as though you might be family. And maybe, in the spiritual geometry of the place, you are. Here's something that might surprise you. The nap pavilions, known as bale loji or bale wantilan, depending on their style and function, aren't necessarily hidden away like secret snoozing dens. They're often placed in prominent areas of the temple complex. Not in the center where the main altars stand, but not far from it either. Which, let's be honest, is unusual. Most cultures reserve public religious space for performance, chants, processions, genuflections, not for people to casually flop down and rest their eyes. But in Bali, sacred and mundane bleed into one another like ink in water. You'll see a woman balancing a tower of fruit offerings on her head while giggling with a friend. You'll watch a priest tap a drum with one hand while shooing a cat with the other. You'll find someone dozing 10 feet from a statue of Ganesha, and no one blinks. Rest is part of devotion. This isn't laziness. It's pacing, intentionality, a rhythm older than kings and older than coffee. Though the Balinese do enjoy their kopi Bali, and yes, it's strong enough to bring a buffalo back to life. You shuffle over to the tea and rice cakes, offered without ceremony and accepted with quiet thanks. The flavors are simple, sticky, sweet and spiced, but deeply satisfying. They aren't snacks in the Western sense. They're gestures. You eat them sitting cross-legged in the shade of another bale. This one's smaller, its columns carved with serpents and flowers. A younger boy lies nearby, his sarong bunched up around his knees, one arm flopped across his face in the classic teenage do not disturb position. You resist the urge to laugh. This moment, tea, rice cake, breeze, isn't an interruption in temple life. It is temple life. This pavilion, in all its breezy openness, is both a spiritual chamber and a living room. It's where ceremonies pause for breath, where offerings are assembled, where children nap mid-ritual and elders sit with memories too old for words. And yes, people fall asleep here, all the time. Historians still argue whether these structures were originally meant for ritual rest or if the practice evolved from broader communal habits. Some suggest that the pavilion's sleeping function came later, as temple life expanded to accommodate daily rhythms. Others think the practice is pre-Hindu, rooted in animist traditions, where rest near sacred spaces was part of maintaining harmony with unseen spirits. Either way, the result is the same: a culturally sanctioned, deeply spiritual form of rest. And while we're myth-busting, let's be clear, Balinese people aren't napping their way through temple festivals. These are not casual snooze parties. They're deliberate acts of rest, observed with awareness. You'll often see people wake naturally at the slightest change in the environment. A shift in incense scent, a new note from the gamelan, the approach of a priest. It's almost like the body is tuned into the temple itself, breathing with it. You lean back against one of the wooden columns, tracing a carved swirl with your fingertip. The pavilion feels less like a building and more like an organism. Part human, part treehouse, part sky. And as you lounge there, full of tea and silence, you begin to wonder if the West got it wrong. Maybe sacredness isn't in the struggle. Maybe you don't have to fast or kneel or flay yourself open to be worthy of peace. Maybe you just have to lie down under a roof that whispers, "You belong." You look up. The underside of the roof is dark wood, latticed like a woven mat, and above that, bright slivers of daylight peek through the gaps in the thatch. It's imperfect and beautiful. A little bit of sun, a little bit of shadow. Like everything else here, it breathes in opposites. It reminds you of something, a fringe theory you read once about ritual fatigue. Some scholars speculate that ancient temple builders around the world understood the physiological limits of devotion. That sacred architecture wasn't just about spectacle, but recovery. There are niches in Egyptian temples sized just right for seated rest, benches carved into Greek amphitheaters. And in Bali, whole pavilions where the ceremony of rest is taken just as seriously as the ceremony of movement. You sip the last of your tea and think, there's a lot to learn from that. A lot the modern world has forgotten. No one tells you to get up. No one asks why you're still sitting there, watching the light shift and the shadows stretch. The temple seems to approve of your slowness. And here's a final twist. Some of the nap pavilions are used by priests themselves, before major ceremonies, after trance states, in between prayer cycles. The most spiritually tuned among them understand that clarity isn't constant, that vision ebbs and flows, that sometimes to reconnect with the divine, you have to disconnect first. You shift slightly, listening to the soft creak of the bamboo floor. A breeze lifts the edge of the curtain, and through the slats, you glimpse another figure reclining in the far pavilion. Not asleep, not fully awake, just there, breathing, present, and without meaning to, you match their rhythm. The sun has slipped to its afternoon angle now, tilting the shadows just so that they glide diagonally across the mossy stones like lazy dancers. The air has warmed again, and the scent of frangipani blossoms rides along the breeze, mingling with the faintest trace of burnt incense. You're no longer sure what time it is, or even what day, and strangely, that feels right. You step barefoot across the courtyard toward another bale, this one with more intricate carvings and a set of old bronze gongs stacked in the corner like sleepy giants. There's a lizard on one of the beams, sunbathing in total stillness, probably the closest thing to a spiritual mascot here. As you lower yourself onto the cool floorboards, you realize the nap pavilions are not just places to rest the body, they're social glue. People come and go here not just to sleep, but to reconnect, gossip, laugh, watch the sky together in contented silence. Some of the elders will sit here for hours, palms open on their knees, not meditating in the formal sense, but doing something much quieter and harder, being available to life. One woman beside you peels a green mango with the blade of her thumbnail, offering you a slice with an easy tilt of her hand. It's sour and fresh and snaps your attention back to the present. You thank her and she just smiles. She doesn't speak English and you don't speak Balinese, but it doesn't matter. The pavilion translates everything. In Balinese culture, ngaya is the concept of offering service, not as obligation, but as joyful contribution. You clean the temple, prepare the flowers, or, yes, simply nap where the ancestors once did, offering your stillness as a kind of reverence. That's right. Stillness itself can be a gift. And this doesn't just apply to humans. There's a village rooster that regularly dozes in one of the corner pavilions during temple days. People step around him carefully, nodding with the same respect they'd offer to a half-awake uncle. No one shoos him off. He belongs here too. Scholars still debate whether these pavilions originally served ritual purposes first and sleep second, or if it was the other way around. What they do agree on is this. These resting spaces are part of a larger cultural model that doesn't separate the sacred from the soft, the devotional from the domestic, and definitely not the spiritual from the horizontal. You lean back on your elbows and gaze up again. The beams above are painted in faded reds and golds, flaking here and there, but still whispering stories of mythic birds and forest gods. There's something almost mischievous in the art, like the deities are in on the joke. You feel their presence not as judgment, but as a kind of amused companionship. They've seen it all, and they still made space for naps. Back home, sleep might be framed as laziness or weakness, a guilty indulgence to be carved out only when all the real work is done. But here, sleep is integrated, encouraged, blessed. The temple doesn't demand your exhaustion. It invites your wholeness. A breeze rustles the roof thatch above, and it sounds like a lullaby made of leaves. The woman with the mango has dozed off now, head tilted at the exact impossible angle that only grandmothers seem able to achieve. A little boy curls next to her, thumb in his mouth, the hem of her sarong gripped in one hand like a lifeline. You remember something you read once. In Bali, sleep is not just personal, it's relational. You don't just sleep for yourself. You sleep for the spirits, for the community, to keep the harmony between the worlds intact. Rest in this frame is a type of spiritual hygiene. If the soul is tired, it stirs up imbalance. And imbalance invites mischief, tiny chaos spirits known as leak or Butakala, who thrive on disorder. Now, does everyone still believe that literally? Not necessarily. But the idea lives on, even if you're not worried about being stalked by a cheeky chaos demon. You still feel the unspoken nudge. Go lie down. Breathe slower. Don't mess up the balance. You stretch your legs across the floorboards, listening to a group of teenage boys outside laughing as they rehearse their barong dance. The thump of their bare feet and occasional yelps of goofball bravado drift in like a soundtrack. No one tells them to hush. The pavilion absorbs all sound equally, whether it's ancient chants or somebody's cracking voice mid-puberty. And here's a fun little twist. The architecture of these pavilions contributes directly to their vibe. Their open sides encourage airflow, yes, but also foster this democratic kind of acoustics. You're never sealed off from the world. You're not enclosed, but you're protected. You can hear the rain start before it reaches you. You can feel the drum beats without seeing the dancers. It's a space for tuned-in rest. Historians argue whether this design is a remnant of indigenous Austronesian architectural patterns, or if it developed more fully during the Majapahit-influenced Hindu-Buddhist era. It doesn't really matter. The point is, someone somewhere figured out that you could build sacred space with air. You close your eyes again, not out of fatigue, but out of an instinct to honor the silence. To join the rhythm. You think, maybe the whole point isn't to power through. Maybe it's to soften in. Someone places a fresh offering beside the shrine. A palm leaf tray filled with tiny marigolds, crackers, and the ghost of yesterday's banana. A stick of incense curls a lazy dragon tail into the sky. The air bends a little with the scent, and you realize something. This snap pavilion is not an add-on. It's not optional. It is the sacred. You are, right now, lying in a temple that thinks sleep is holy. And you are exactly where you're supposed to be. A rooster crows somewhere beyond the banyan trees, as if trying to remind you that yes, time is still a thing. But here in the temple, time flows more like mist than minutes. You stretch one leg, then the other, and slowly sit up again. No one rushes you. No one even really notices. In the Balinese temple complex, rising from a nap is just another small ceremony. You wander over to another structure nearby. Another bale, though this one's slightly elevated, with a carved frieze of frogs and stylized clouds running along the base. There's a soft pile of woven mats inside, their colors bleached by years of afternoon sun. You pause. The energy here is different, quieter still, if that's even possible. Like this place has its own gravity well of peace. This is the Bale Sumangan, sometimes known as the Dreaming Pavilion. It's less used these days, but traditionally it served not just as a napping spot, but a place where priests or elders might go to listen for dreams, literally, to hear the messages that came in through rest. A nap as prophecy, you might say, though no one's in a rush to declare it dramatic. The messages aren't booming voices. They come as symbols. A rooster looking east, a tree full of bees, a sensation that the rice has been forgotten in the offering. Small things, soft nudges. It sounds far-fetched at first, but then you remember the times you've woken up with an answer to a problem you hadn't consciously solved, or the dreams that clung to you for hours after waking, thick with meaning you couldn't quite name. Maybe the Balinese just gave those phenomena a room of their own. Historians still debate how widespread and formal these dreaming practices were. Some believe the Sumangan pavilions were only symbolic, places for purification or transitional rites. while others argue they were very much functional tools for divining collective wisdom through individual stillness. What's not debated? These structures were always placed close to the inner sanctum. They were trusted to hold sacred sleep. You lie down again, just for a moment. The wood beneath you creaks in a familiar way, like it's adjusting to your weight, like it remembers others who rested here before. The air is laced with clove smoke and old teak. Someone hums softly nearby, maybe to themselves, maybe to the spirits, or both. As your eyelids drift, you start to wonder what it means to build a culture around that kind of listening, not just to gods or ancestors, but to the whisperings of your own unconscious mind. To dream as participation, not escapism. Here, the line between sleep and prayer gets blurrier by the minute. And then, just as your mind begins to tilt into the dream space, you hear the gentle clang of a bell. Not sharp, not commanding. Just one soft chime that echoes through the complex like a ripple through water. A daily offering is about to begin. No one announces it. People just drift toward the shrines, like birds catching a change in wind. You join the slow procession. There's no pressure. You don't have to understand the rituals to be part of the rhythm. Women carry woven trays on their heads, stacked with banana leaves, flowers, sometimes a juice box. Yes, really. Spirits like sweet things too, and modernity has a sense of humor. You settle on the edge of the group as incense sticks are lit and prayers whispered with cupped hands. The offerings are laid gently at each altar, accompanied by gestures so soft they seem almost like sign language for dreams. A little water is sprinkled, a little rice pressed to the forehead. The ritual is quiet, precise, and utterly ordinary. You notice something. No one looks bored. No one rushes. These aren't rituals performed out of fear or obligation. They're acts of dailiness, as routine as brushing teeth, but infused with reverence, like folding the napkin a certain way, because your grandmother always did, because it feels good, because it connects you backward and forward in time. The ceremony ends with more stillness. People linger, sit, talk in murmurs. A few wander back to the Nat Pavilions. One old man has brought a tiny radio playing gamelan music at such a low volume, it sounds like wind chimes submerged in a pool. You sit beside him, not to talk, but to share space. And that's when you realize these temples weren't just made for worship. They were designed to be lived in, to cradle not only the divine but the drowsy, the social, the snack-seeking, the bored toddlers and drifting elders alike. There's room here for everything. Even the gods nap sometimes, you think. Why shouldn't we? A bat flutters out from beneath the roof, unnoticed except by you. It swings a lazy arc through the sky before vanishing again into the foliage. The man beside you hums a few bars of the gamelan tune and taps his foot. Not keeping time, just being part of it. You glance back at the bale sumangan and feel a tug, like something in you wants to try again, to lie back down, not because you're tired, but because some questions can only be answered horizontally. And maybe, just maybe, the gods are most generous when you stop trying so hard to hear them. You close your eyes and breathe. The scent of frangipani folds into your lungs as you blink awake. If in fact you'd ever fully left waking, the lines blur here. Sleep doesn't come in neat chunks, like it does in modern bedrooms with alarms and Fitbits and dreams squashed between Netflix binges. Here, it washes over you in gentle tides. You may never be quite sure when you slept or how long. Your feet find the earth again, warm and textured like bread crust. The temple courtyard is bathed in that kind of golden afternoon light that makes everything, even cracked stone and crooked stairs, look like a painting. You stroll slowly following the path of soft moss between shrines until you find another kind of pavilion, this one bustling in its own muted way. It's a kitchen technically, or at least the temple's version of one, the payon. Not sacred in the usual sense, but make no mistake, this is a holy place of its own kind. You can smell lemongrass, grilled banana, toasted coconut. Someone is frying tempeh in a shallow pan. A grandmother in a faded sarong flicks water from her fingers onto a sizzling surface and nods, as if the crackle told her a secret only she could hear. This is the temple's heart in another register, the one that beats through bellies, not bells. You settle on a low stool as someone slides you a cup of hot bajigu, a creamy blend of palm sugar, coconut milk, and a hint of ginger. It tastes like warm dusk, like stories told over rice, like a lullaby you can sip. You thank the woman serving it, and she gives you the kind of smile that doesn't ask questions. You're here. That's enough. Historians often skip over these details when discussing Balinese temples. The textbooks talk about architecture, festivals, royal patronage. They rarely mention the midday snacks. But if you ask locals what makes a temple feel alive, they'll probably point to the payon, to the way food binds ritual to routine. There's something beautifully matter-of-fact about it. These meals aren't offerings, per se, though some do double duty, first placed on a shrine, then eaten after the gods have metaphorically tasted them. They're nourishment. They're an excuse to gather. And, let's be honest, they're probably a way to lure people back after nap time. One wrinkled man, sitting near the edge of the cooking space, tells you about his younger days here. He says the bale loji, the priest's pavilion, used to creak so much when you sat down that it scared off squirrels. But the payon, he says with a wink, never creaked. It just welcomed. You ask gently if naps in the temple were always so common. Of course, he replies. Where else would you dream the dreams worth remembering? It's not just poetry. You learn that the placement of the kitchen within the temple is very deliberate. It's often set slightly apart, but still inside the compound walls. It ensures a sensory continuity, incense and spices blending, coconut smoke rising alongside sandalwood. Food and faith, entwined like strands of the same thread. The conversation drifts to megibun, a communal eating tradition borrowed from Karangasem nobility, but adopted widely. Everyone gathers around banana leaf-lined trays, eating together with fingers, the act, as much about harmony as hunger. Imagine doing that after a nap. Sacred digestion, blissful post-dream snacking. You make a mental note to try it if ever invited. Some scholars argue that the food culture inside temples served as a subtle way of reinforcing community roles. Who prepped, who cooked, who served, who cleaned, it all reflected larger patterns of respect, hierarchy, and cooperation. Others believe the kitchen was a small rebellion, a space where gossip, laughter, and small joys could flourish under the noses of gods too lofty to care about whether the coconut was burned. But here's the thing. In Bali, the gods are rarely too lofty. They're playful, hungry, sleepy, and sometimes picky. That's why offerings come with snacks and cigarettes, with miniaturized packets of coffee and mirrors. Why shouldn't they also appreciate the aroma of spiced cassava? You linger longer than you meant to, swept up in a conversation about the proper way to shred galangal. It's strangely soothing. Every little ritual, yes, even culinary ones, feels like a spell being cast. A way to affirm the world as it is, and as it could be. Eventually, you rise and continue your gentle loop through the compound. You notice now how the scent of food lingers in corners like a ghost with good taste. A child naps on her mother's lap, a speck of turmeric on her cheek. Nearby, a cat lounges on a cracked stone stela, blissfully indifferent to your passing. And again, you feel that thread. Food, rest, spirit, body, all woven into the fabric of this place. You can't imagine one without the others. The nap pavilions aren't an anomaly. They're part of a larger logic. One that says worship isn't just prayer, it's also digestion. Dreaming, sitting quietly with hot ginger milk while the incense burns down to ash. In the West, temples are often defined by rules. What not to wear, where not to stand. But here, in this soft afternoon light, temples feel like they're built for staying, for belonging, for being tired after dancing, or full after praying, or just a bit lost between thoughts. You pause under a carved lintel and breathe deep. Your belly full, your limbs loose, your heart humming with a rhythm older than clocks. And somewhere deep inside, a nap starts forming again. Not out of necessity, but invitation. You find yourself wandering again, slower this time, as if each step now carries the dense, honeyed weight of afternoon sleepiness, like syrup sliding down the side of a coconut bowl. The shadows are longer now, stretching across the carved stone paths like they're in on a joke. And ahead of you, tucked quietly near a shrine wrapped in checkered Poland cloth, you spot something new. It's a bale pawadan, a pavilion used for recitation. But at this moment, it holds no priests or scrolls. Instead, two older women sit there humming. Not words, not songs you recognize, just tones, like memory held together by sound. One's rhythm matches your heartbeat without asking. The other's pitch reminds you of tea steam rising through silence. They're not alone. Around them, woven mats unfurl across the platform, dotted with motionless limbs and faces caught mid-dream. No one seems to be performing anything official. No rituals, no fire, no clanging gamelan in this corner. And yet, the sacredness is unmistakable, reverent in its quiet, holy in its lack of effort. You sit, fold-kneed, just on the edge, and try to still yourself. It's not easy. Your modern brain wants a task. But here, stillness is the task. This part of the temple isn't usually listed on maps. Western visitors tend to overlook it entirely, assuming the wooden deck is for storage or side prayers. But Balinese elders know differently. The Bale Pawadan is a sacred listening place. For scripture sometimes, yes, but also for silence, for breath, for stories that don't need telling because the body already remembers them. You close your eyes and listen. The wind picks up ever so slightly, sending a soft ripple through a nearby flag. A child murmurs in her sleep. Somewhere, someone is softly chewing sugarcane. And beneath it all, the unmistakable pulse-like throb of nothing, blissful nothing. It turns out that sleep, here, isn't just tolerated, it's structured. Temples were designed with rest in mind, not as a bonus or accident, but as an essential element of the experience. This isn't just cultural whimsy, it's architecture meeting anthropology. Rest woven into religion. One scholar, with the charmingly chaotic handwriting of someone who's spent too long in dusty archives, theorizes that certain shrines were intentionally built with lull in mind. Their placement avoids the harshest light, the coldest winds. They amplify birdsong, not traffic. They offer corners for slumping, walls to lean on, rhythms slow enough to catch you when you fall forward into sleep. You remember something odd the local priest said earlier, that even the temple roosters know when not to crow. He wasn't joking. Here, silence is a form of knowledge. And naps, they're a kind of offering. But why? Why build sacred space for sleep? One possibility lies in the Balinese philosophy of Sakala Niskala, the seen and the unseen. Temples aren't just spaces for human activity. They're thresholds, places where spirits linger, ancestors drift. Dreams are considered bridges between the tangible and the mystical. To sleep in a temple is, in some sense, to practice spirit travel, to let your body soften enough for wisdom to pass through. That's why you often see dream-inspired offerings. Flowers arranged in a circle because someone saw a wheel of fire in their nap. Rice shaped like an eagle after a midday vision. Dreams aren't idle. They're instructions. And sleep becomes a kind of sacred education. It's funny, you think, how modern life trains you to dismiss your naps as laziness. Here, it might be the opposite. Maybe sleep is where you receive your homework from the gods. And while the scholarly world hasn't entirely caught up to this view, whispers do exist in the margins. Field notes mention temple goers reporting recurring dreams after napping in certain shrines. Some say they feel pulled to visit again. Others swear they wake up knowing things they hadn't known they were missing. Names of forgotten relatives, remedies for an unspoken illness, lines of old family songs. Of course, Western academia calls that anecdotal. But here, in the soft grain of the temple floor, it feels like evidence. You're brought back to the present by the smell of clove smoke. Someone nearby is lighting a new stick of incense. Its curl rises like a question you're too drowsy to answer. The women who had been humming are now still. One leans gently against a carved pillar, her head bobbing, the way heads do when they've earned the right to rest wherever they please. And so, you lie back. Just a little. Not fully horizontal. You're still a guest after all. But enough to feel the change. Enough to give your weight to the wood, to let your eyes close without apology. The temple doesn't mind. It's seen this before. You think about how many generations have slept here. How many sandalwood-scented dreams have drifted across this same ceiling. How many revelations were whispered into half-awake minds, wrapped in banana leaves by dawn. You think of home, wherever that is. The alarms, the caffeine, the forced mindfulness, the productivity apps. And you wonder, what if the most spiritual thing you could do tomorrow? There's something about the way the light changes now, edging toward golden. Not quite the full embrace of sunset, but the kind of light that makes even stone seem soft. You notice how the carved figures on nearby walls appear to be exhaling, as if they too have spent the day watching over napping pilgrims and are now ready to rest themselves. You haven't moved for several minutes, or maybe longer. Time is strangely elastic here, and while your body may still be half upright on that shaded pavilion, your mind is off wandering, drawn deeper into the folds of Balinese temple life, and into one of its most peculiar features, the architectural rhythms of slowness. That's right. Slowness isn't a byproduct in these temples. It's built in, measured, designed. You recall earlier noticing how the pathways zigzag, deliberately avoiding straight lines. It's not for aesthetic flair. It's to confuse spirits, sure, but also to slow you down, force you to pause, look, breathe. Even the placement of statues and shrines demands you pivot, bow, shift your gaze. It's choreography, sacred footwork for the sleepy-minded. Architectural historians sometimes call this ritual pacing. They point to the way temples are arranged to foster what's known as taksu, a kind of spiritual charisma or soul presence. To enter too quickly is to miss it. You need to be metabolized by the temple slowly. Each step not just a movement, but an acclamation. And in the center of that logic, rest. You now understand why every structure here seems to have a secondary function. The ceremonial gate isn't just for grand entrances. It casts a perfect strip of shade in the heat of day. The offering platform doubles as a footrest. The pillar base, wide enough to lean your spine against. No one scolds you for pausing. No one says, keep moving. If anything, pausing is expected. And then there's the nap pavilion. Always the nap pavilion. It's not called that officially. The term varies depending on the village. Bale loji, bale dangin, or simply the quiet place. But locals know what it's for. They rarely need to explain. It's for the moments between, the breath between chants, the sigh between offerings. In fact, many Balinese rituals have intentional lull periods. Moments built into the ceremony where nothing is said. No gongs, no incense, no prayers. Just people sitting quietly, sometimes nodding off. This isn't seen as disrespect. It's part of the rhythm. Elders often say that the gods, like humans, appreciate a break now and then. It's only polite. What Western observers sometimes misunderstand as gaps in the ritual are, in fact, carefully timed pockets of stillness. An acknowledgement that the body needs to catch up. That connection, true, sacred connection, can't be rushed. It must stretch, yawn, and settle. And while scholars debate whether this structural emphasis on rest originated with specific religious texts or simply evolved from climate and culture, one thing's clear: it's intentional. You glance around and notice a group of children gathered under a banyan tree at the edge of the compound. They're not playing. Not exactly. They're lying in a heap, one absently drawing in the dirt, another chewing on a stalk of lemongrass. It's the kind of scene that would prompt anxious modern parenting elsewhere. Do something productive. But here, doing nothing is the point. A priest slowly walks past, his sarong rustling like dry leaves. He sees the children and smiles, not indulgently, reverently, as though their stillness is a kind of worship. You shift, letting your back settle against a wooden beam. The grain is worn smooth by years of leanness. You wonder how many stories it could tell. Probably none in words, but in weight, in size, in silent prayers mumbled just before drifting off. A fringe academic once posited that certain temple beams were shaped to echo the human spine, not by accident, but as an invitation. A sacred ergonomics, if you will. You'd chuckle if the idea didn't feel so perfectly believable. And even though most scholars raise an eyebrow at that claim, a few admit there's something uncanny about the way the architecture anticipates your posture. The floor slats welcome your ankles. The railing catches your shoulder. The wind doesn't just blow, it cradles. You think back to your own spaces. How chairs are designed for meetings, desks for productivity. Even couches, supposed bastions of leisure, often feel like they're preparing you to launch back into activity. But here, in this 700-year-old courtyard, stillness is the design brief. It's a rare thing to feel physically encouraged to rest. Rarer still for that encouragement to come from carved stone and thatched roof. The temple breathes slower now, fewer footsteps, less chatter, a subtle descent into evening. the Nap Pavilion remains occupied, not by snorers, but by dreamers. Eyes closed, faces loose. One woman's fingers twitch slightly, mid-dream, as though stirring an invisible pot. Another child mumbles something about mangoes. And you, well, you're not sure if you're awake anymore. But that's fine. This isn't a place that needs answers. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows. Not an urgent morning call, but a confused solo act. Just one of Bali's many feathered philosophers, apparently unsure what time it is. You don't blame him. Time here no longer obeys its usual rules. The air has grown cooler, softer. You feel it settle on your skin like gauze. Between the trees, a string of prayer flags flutters lazily, their colors faded from years of sun and silence. Everything is slowing down now, including you. And with that slowing comes another question. What does it mean to nap in a sacred space? In Western traditions, temples and churches are places of solemnity, often stiff with the posture and performance. Sit upright, don't fidget, no slouching. Sleeping? Absolutely not, unless you're a toddler losing a war with gravity in a pew. But here in Bali, rest doesn't profane the sacred, it completes it. In fact, in certain temple festivals, nap pavilions are central, not side features. People will travel for hours to attend a ceremony, participate in chants, place offerings. And then, instead of heading home, they lie down under the pavilion roof and stay. Not from exhaustion, but from ritual. There's even a phrase in Balinese, melajah uli purnama, loosely translated as studying from the full moon. It refers to the quiet knowledge gained not by effort, but by absorption, by sitting with the mystery long enough that it soaks into you, like warm rain into cotton. And the best way to absorb? You guessed it, a nap. Anthropologists argue about the origin of this concept. Some say it links back to animist beliefs when spirits were thought to enter dreams more freely than waking life. Others claim it was a practical response to long ceremonies and tropical heat. Still others wonder if it began with the priests themselves, high-caste Brahmins who, after hours of chanting in Sanskrit, simply needed a place to collapse with dignity. Regardless of origin, the outcome is the same. A culture that doesn't just allow sleep in temples, it curates it. You shift slightly and glance upward. The ceiling of the nap pavilion above you is a marvel of carved teak and woven palm. There's a repeating lotus motif, symbol of enlightenment, sure, but also of patience, of blooming slowly in only when ready. You wonder how many eyes have blinked sleepily at that same ceiling over the centuries. How many worries were dulled here. How many ideas sparked quietly between dreams. You remember hearing a story from a temple keeper earlier today. An older woman with a laugh like snapping incense sticks. She told you about a wandering painter who came to her temple in the 1940s. He had no money, no proper offering, and looked exhausted. She let him nap on the pavilion anyway. 3 hours later, he woke up and painted an entire mural with his leftover pigments. It still hangs in her cousin's courtyard. Sometimes the gods speak through dreams, she'd said. Other times, they just tell you to lie down and hush. It's a lovely idea. That wisdom isn't always found in action. That sometimes stillness is the answer. Or at least the question. A gentle gong sounds in the distance. Not a summons, more like a reminder. You're still here. Still welcome. You look around and notice something you hadn't before. Near the base of a pillar, tucked behind a woven mat, there's a basket filled with soft square pillows. Not ornate ones, Simple cotton, maybe stuffed with dried kapok. You pull one closer and lay your hand on it. It's warm from the sun. A whisper of incense drifts in. Clove, maybe frangipani. It's hard to tell now. Your senses are blending, stretching out like cats in the heat. And with that stretch, a memory returns. Earlier in the day, during your temple tour, a guide mentioned that these pavilions are often placed at a specific cardinal direction. East-facing when possible, to catch the morning sun, but also to align with the breath of the gods, which is said to rise with the dawn. It's poetic and a little mysterious, the kind of fact you'd normally scribble in a notebook. But here, you just let it sit. Let it be. You recline just a little more, and your head touches the wooden beam behind you. It feels just right, as though thousands of heads have smoothed this exact groove over time. A collective sigh carved into architecture. And even as the sky purples and the bats begin their shift above, no one is in a rush. There's no last call, no temple guard herding you out. The Nat Pavilion doesn't close. Rest is not a limited resource here. You begin to think of the many people who have rested in this spot before you. Farmers, dancers, mask makers, lovers, grieving sons, laughing grandmothers. Maybe a few Dutch colonists who, despite themselves, found the woven roof too inviting to resist. The Nat Pavilion doesn't care who you are. You could be a local, a tourist, a deity in disguise. It offers the same silence to all. And in that silence, something shifts inside you. Not an epiphany, nothing dramatic, just a softening. You are no longer merely observing this space. You are of it. One more breathing body folded into the story of this place. One more offering, laid gently at the altar of rest. You blink slowly, as if the act itself might stir the next detail loose. But no, this isn't a place where things need to be figured out, just felt. Someone nearby shifts on a bamboo mat, the soft hiss of woven reeds adjusting under weight. No words exchanged, just the quiet choreography of bodies at rest. You wonder if they too are dreaming. Maybe of ancestors. Maybe of what they'll cook for dinner. Maybe nothing at all. That's the beauty of this temple pavilion. It doesn't ask for dreams. It simply holds the space in case one shows up. Long ago, Balinese priests held the belief that sleep was not absence, but transit, a crossing of thresholds, the conscious self stepping politely aside so the deeper layers could rise and stretch. Here, that philosophy took physical shape. A Nat Pavilion beside the sacred shrines, as though to say, go ahead, you've done your offerings. Now, lie down and listen. It's hard to imagine something like this in the middle of a cathedral or a mosque, a space where the divine invites you to recline. But in Bali, where religion is not something separate from life, but stitched into every thread of the day, it makes perfect sense. The gods eat, bathe, dance, and yes, nap. So why shouldn't you? A soft breeze stirs the hanging cloth banners at the pavilion's edge. They sway in gentle arcs, like someone waving sleepily from the other side of a river. You follow their rhythm with your eyes, letting your thoughts slow to match their tempo. Not far from here, in a coastal village, there's a temple built directly into a cliff. It's known not for its grandeur, but for its silence. Monks there believe that true worship begins the moment the brain lets go, that the mind, when not trying so hard, becomes a better antenna. One scholar you read had a more grounded take. She argued that Nat Pavilions were also a way to keep elders and children comfortable during long rituals, a practical kindness. Another historian scoffed, and said they were just status symbols, a show of generosity from wealthier temple patrons. And another, your favorite, simply shrugged and said, "Maybe the gods like naps too. Who's to say they don't?" A rooster crows again, softer this time, like he's second-guessing himself. You smile. Even the wildlife here doesn't rush. You glance to the far side of the pavilion, where a line of sandals waits in uneven rows. Old leather, new rubber, woven reeds. Some with flowers tucked into them. Offerings, perhaps, or just decoration. It's always hard to tell in Bali. The line between sacred and casual is charmingly blurry. Just past the sandals, a child sleeps with her head on her mother's lap, fingers still curled around a dried marigold. Her breath is slow, steady, a visible lesson in surrender. Your own limbs are heavier now, not in a burdensome way. More like you're slowly turning into the same warm wood that holds you. Part of the beams, the floor, the history. There's a stone carving on the wall beside you. A stylized face with closed eyes and a faint smile. It's unclear whether it's a deity or a monk, or just a very content carpenter. Either way, the message is unmistakable. Relax. And you do. You think back to something you heard earlier from a village elder. A wiry man with more temple stories than teeth. He said the Nap Pavilion isn't just for people. Spirits, too, need a rest sometimes. Even a ghost gets tired, he chuckled, offering you a tamarind sweet. If you want to meet one, best place is here, just before dusk. But they're polite. They wait their turn. You remember blinking at him, unsure whether he was joking. Now, reclining on this wooden floor, watching the light fade to indigo, you're not so sure he was. You shift slightly and notice something new. A small crack in one of the beams where someone has carved a tiny word in Balinese script. You can't read it, but you trace it with your finger anyway. It feels like a signature, a message from a previous dreamer. And with that, you realize this whole pavilion is a kind of message, a love letter to the body's quiet wisdom, to the idea that stillness can be sacred, that lying down, far from being lazy, might just be the most reverent thing you can do. Outside, the sounds change. Frogs now, crickets, the soft plunk of a falling fruit, temple bells long since stilled, the hush that follows ritual, the slow exhale of a long luminous day. You nestle your head into the crook of your arm, feel your breath sink with the warm hush around you. It's not a ceremony, but it kind of is. This is the part of the story where there are no more facts, no more scholarly debates, just the slow, amber unfolding of the night. You are in the temple's heart now, no longer a visitor, just another dreamer welcomed into the fold. So now, here you are, still, soft and warm. The air is thick with nighttime jasmine, and your limbs are sinking deeper into calm. There's no story left to follow, only the gentle rhythm of breath and breeze. Each sound beyond the temple fades into a slower whirl. Frogs chirp like faraway lullabies. Cloth banners whisper in the dark, and the wood beneath you holds centuries of sleep, cradling you in the same hush that soothed dancers, farmers, monks, and curious travelers alike. If your mind starts to drift, let it. If your eyes want to close, don't resist. There is nothing to do, nowhere to be. The pavilion watches over you, just as it has watched over thousands before you. You're safe here. Welcome here. Loved, even if only by the stillness. So breathe in, slowly. Let it out even slower. The night has you. The story is over, and now you rest.